The Grand Archive of the Valorian Collective was the largest library in the known galaxy. Its halls stretched for hundreds of kilometers, filled with knowledge from 12 star systems and countless dead worlds. Billions of books, recordings, and artifacts sat in perfect preservation, waiting for curious minds to discover them. Professor Talek walked to the center of the lecture hall, his four eyes scanning the crowd of students before him. They came from many species, some with scales, others with feathers, a few made of living crystal. All of them had gathered to learn about the dead, about civilizations that had risen, burned bright, and then vanished into the long silence of history. Talek was old, even by Valorian standards. He had spent 300 years studying extinct species, piecing together their stories from bones and ruins and forgotten data chips. He had seen many strange things in his long career, but nothing fascinated him more than the subject of today's lecture. Today, he said, his voice echoing through the hall, we will discuss species 7291C. You may know them by their common name, the Terrans, or, as they called themselves, humans. He pressed a button on his control pad. A holographic image appeared above the stage, a small blue planet covered in water and green land. It looked peaceful, beautiful, even. This was their home world. They called it Earth. By all measures, it should have killed them. The image changed, showing violent storms, erupting volcanoes, and massive predators with sharp teeth. The students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Extreme temperature changes, a star that constantly bombarded them with harmful radiation, natural disasters that could destroy entire regions, predators that hunted them, diseases that killed millions. And yet, somehow, these soft, fragile creatures not only survived, they conquered their world. Talek paused, letting the weight of his words settle. In less than 200,000 years, they went from hitting rocks together to traveling between stars. Do you understand how fast that is? Most species take millions of years to achieve space travel. The humans did it in a cosmic eye blink. A student raised a tentacle. Professor, if they were so successful, why are they extinct? Talek's expression grew serious. That is a complicated question, young one. The official records say they destroyed themselves in a great war. But the truth is, we do not entirely know. They simply vanished. Every human world, every ship, every station, gone. Disappeared in a single moment, 847,000 years ago. He continued the lecture, showing images of human achievements. Massive cities that touched the clouds. Ships that could cross galaxies in days. Medical technology that could heal almost any wound. Art and music that even now made the alien students feel something strange and powerful in their hearts. They were builders, Talek explained. Dreamers. They looked at the impossible and said, why not? When other species saw limits, humans saw challenges. When others counseled caution, humans ran forward with reckless joy. He displayed images of human faces, laughing, crying, fighting, loving. Despite their strange features, there was something almost familiar about them. Something that made even the oldest professors feel a strange sense of kinship. But perhaps their greatest achievement was this. A new image appeared. It showed a laboratory filled with complex machines and busy scientists in white coats. At the center stood a young woman with black hair and bright, determined eyes. Project Eternal Spring. The human attempt to cure death itself. According to our records, they actually succeeded. This woman, Park Yuna, was the lead researcher and the first successful test subject. Her cells became self-repairing. Her aging process reversed. In theory, she could live forever. The students murmured in amazement. Immortality was a dream that many species had chased. None had ever achieved it. Of course, Talek continued, we cannot confirm if it truly worked. The humans vanished before we could study their research. All we have are fragments, pieces of a puzzle we may never complete." He pressed another button, and a new image filled the hall. It was a graduation photograph. Rows of young humans in ceremonial robes, holding paper scrolls, smiling at the camera. A banner behind them read, "Seoul National University, Class of 2157. At the center of the front row stood the same woman from the laboratory, Park Yuna. Younger, happier, her whole life ahead of her. "This image is 847,000 years old," Talek said. "The original is preserved in our most secure vault. It shows the human tradition of graduation, a ceremony celebrating the completion of their educational training. Notice their expressions. Despite living on a death world, despite all the dangers they faced, they still found reasons to smile." In the back row of the lecture hall, a young female student sat very still. Her name was Yuna. At least, that was the name she had given when she registered for classes 3 years ago. She had listed her species as Valorian hybrid and her origin as the Outer Rim territories. No one had questioned it. Hybrids were common enough, and her features were close enough to Valorian standard. She had been sketching in her notebook, only half listening to the lecture. Ancient history had never interested her much. She preferred practical subjects, medicine, biology, the living rather than the dead. But now her pencil had stopped moving. She stared at the holographic image floating above the stage, at the young woman in the center of the photograph, at the face that looked exactly like her own, the same dark hair, the same bright eyes, the same small scar above the left eyebrow, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Yuna's hand rose before she could stop herself. "Professor," she said, her voice small and strange in her own ears, "why are you displaying my graduation photo?" The lecture hall fell completely silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at her. Professor Talek's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, young one, but this image is nearly 1,000,000 years old. The woman in this photograph died long before any of us were born." Yuna stood up slowly, her legs shaking beneath her. "That's my name," she whispered, pointing at the hologram. "That's my face. That's my university." She could see it clearly now, the banner, the faces of her classmates, the pride in her own young eyes. She remembered that day. She remembered the sunshine, the speeches, her mother crying happy tears. "That's me." The silence stretched. Then Professor Talek quietly pressed a button on his control pad, and security was called. The private inquiry chamber was cold and gray. Yuna sat on a metal chair in the center of the room, her hands folded in her lap, trying to stop them from shaking. 2 security officers stood by the door, their weapons not drawn but clearly visible. Professor Talek sat across from her, his 4 eyes filled with concern rather than suspicion. "I apologize for the dramatic response," the professor said gently. "We simply want to understand what happened. Are you feeling unwell?" Sometimes students experience stress-related episodes when— "I'm not crazy," Yuna said quietly. "I know what I saw." A door opened, and a Valorian medical officer entered the room. He was young, with calm gray skin and patient eyes. His name tag read, "Dowan, Medical Division." "I've been asked to perform a standard health evaluation," he explained, setting down his equipment bag. "Just to make sure you're physically well. Is that acceptable?" Yuna nodded. She had nothing to hide. At least, she did not think she did. Dowan began with simple tests. He checked her temperature, her heart rate, her reflexes. Everything seemed normal. Then he took out a small device and pressed it against her arm. "This will scan your genetic code," he said. "It helps us identify any medical issues specific to your species." Completely routine. The device hummed for a moment. Then it beeped. Do-hwan looked at the screen. His calm expression did not change, but his hands stopped moving. "That's strange," he murmured. "Let me try again." He ran the scan a second time, then a third. Each time, the result was the same. "Is something wrong?" Yuna asked. Do-hwan did not answer immediately. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly looked up at her face. His eyes were different now. Not calm, but shocked. Almost frightened. "Professor Talek," he said, his voice very careful. "You should see this." The old professor walked over and looked at the screen. For the first time since Yuna had known him, he had no words. His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. "What is it?" Yuna demanded. "What's wrong with me?" Do-hwan turned the screen so she could see it. The display showed two genetic profiles side by side. One was labeled Patient Yuna Valorian Hybrid. The other was labeled Archive Sample, Species 7291C, Human. Preserved Specimen. The two profiles were identical, not similar. Not close. Identical. A perfect match down to the smallest detail. "This is impossible," Professor Talek whispered. "These samples were collected 847,000 years ago. No living creature could—" "I'm not a creature," Yuna said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, as if someone else was speaking. I'm human. I remember now. I remember being human." The memories came slowly at first, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. Then faster, rushing, overwhelming. She remembered her childhood in a city called Bizan, the smell of the ocean, her mother's cooking, her father's gentle laugh. She remembered school, friends, first love, first heartbreak. She remembered deciding to become a scientist because she wanted to help people. She remembered late nights in the laboratory, surrounded by brilliant colleagues who became her family. She remembered the day the project succeeded. "Eternal Spring," she whispered. "That was our project. We were trying to cure aging, to stop death. And we did it. I was the first test subject. My cells became self-repairing. My body stopped aging." Do-hwan ran another scan. "Her cellular structure is... I've never seen anything like this. Her cells are repairing themselves in real time. Damage that should take weeks to heal is disappearing in seconds." "How old are you?" Professor Talek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yuna closed her eyes, trying to calculate. But the numbers were too large, the span of time too vast to comprehend. "I was born in the year 2131, she said finally. "By human counting. I was 26 when I graduated. 29 when the project succeeded. After that..." She shook her head. "I don't know. I don't remember. There are gaps. Holes in my memory." Talek sat down heavily, as if his legs could no longer support him. "If you were born in 2131, and the human calendar matches our historical records, you are approximately 847,000 years old." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Yuna looked at her hands. They were smooth, young, unmarked by age. The same hands she had looked at on her graduation day. The same hands that had held the first successful immortality serum. "I should be dead," she said quietly. "I should have died so long ago. Why am I still here? Why don't I remember?" No one had answers. Over the next few days, more tests were performed. Scientists came from across the collective to study her, to verify the impossible results. Her genetic code was analyzed and reanalyzed. Her blood was tested for any sign of contamination or error. Her brain was scanned for signs of false memories or implanted information. Every test confirmed the same thing. She was human. She was ancient. And she was very, very real. The news spread quickly. Within a week, every species in the collective knew about the woman who had lived for nearly 1,000,000 years. Some called her a miracle. Others called her a monster. Many simply called her impossible. But Una did not care about titles or fame. She only cared about one thing: understanding what had happened. Why was she here? How had she survived? And where were the rest of her people? The memories continued to return, piece by piece, like fragments of a shattered mirror slowly coming together. She remembered the war. She remembered the fear. She remembered her friends preparing for something called the scattering. But she could not remember what came after. Only darkness. Only silence. Only the long, empty sleep of 847,000 years. One evening, as she sat alone in her temporary quarters, staring out at the stars, a young Valorian researcher came to visit her. His name was Taiho, and unlike the others, he did not look at her with fear or scientific curiosity. He looked at her with something like hope. "I believe you," he said simply, "and I want to help you find your answers." Una looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since her memories had begun to return, she smiled. "Thank you," she said. "I think I'm going to need all the help I can get." Outside the window, the stars waited in silent witness. Somewhere out there, perhaps, the truth was waiting too. The deep archives held secrets that most people would never see. Locked vaults, sealed chambers, and quantum-preserved artifacts from civilizations long dead. Una walked through the silent halls with Taiho beside her, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Professor Talek had arranged special access for them. If Una's memories were real, then somewhere in these archives, there might be evidence, records, artifacts, something that could explain how a human had survived for 847,000 years. "This section contains everything we have on your species," Talek said, stopping before a massive door. Most of it was recovered from abandoned colonies and drifting ships after the disappearance. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, holographic displays filled the air with images and data. Ships, buildings, faces, an entire civilization, reduced to files in an alien library. Una stepped inside, and the memories hit her like a wave. She saw Jisoo, her best friend and fellow researcher, laughing at a terrible joke during a late-night work session. She saw Hyok, their lead engineer, arguing passionately about some technical problem. She saw Myre, the youngest member of their team, nervously presenting her first breakthrough to the group. "I remember them," Una whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I remember all of them." Taiho stood quietly beside her, offering silent support as she moved through the archive. Each artifact triggered new memories. Each image unlocked another piece of her past. She found a recording, audio only, the video corrupted by time. A familiar voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Seungho of the United Human Fleet. Today, we face our greatest challenge. The Coalition has declared us a threat to galactic stability. They have gathered their combined forces to exterminate our species. But we are human. We do not surrender. We do not give up. And we certainly do not go quietly into the night. Today, we fight. Not for conquest or glory, but for survival. For our children. For our right to exist. All ships, prepare for engagement. And remember, we've beaten worse odds before." The recording ended. Una stood frozen, memories flooding back. She remembered the war now. How it had started with fear and ended in fire. The older species had watched humanity's rapid advancement with growing concern. When news of Project Eternal Spring spread, when the galaxy learned that humans had conquered death itself, concern turned to terror, a species that could not die, that bred quickly, that adapted to every challenge. They would spread across the galaxy like a virus. Or so the Coalition believed. The mathematics were simple. Given enough time, humans would outnumber every other species combined. They had to be stopped while it was still possible. The coalition attacked without warning. 100 worlds burned in the first day, but humanity fought back. Yuna remembered standing on the bridge of the Hanyang, watching the battle unfold in the darkness of space. Human ships outnumbered 10-1, holding the line against impossible odds. Admiral Sen Hao giving orders with calm precision while chaos raged around them. They won that battle. And the next. And the next. But each victory cost them dearly. Ships were lost. Soldiers died. And for every coalition fleet they destroyed, 3 more took its place. We couldn't win, Yuna said slowly, the memory solidifying in her mind. There were too many of them. Too few of us. So we made a different choice. She walked to a display showing old star charts and began manipulating the holographic controls. Her hands remembered the motions, even when her mind did not. The scattering, she continued. That's what we called it. Every human ship, every station, every colony world, equipped with experimental fold drives. Technology we had only just invented. Dangerous, untested, but it was our only hope. A new image appeared, a map of the galaxy with thousands of glowing points representing human settlements. Then, one by one, the points vanished. Not destroyed, simply gone. Disappeared. We jumped, Yuna said. All of us. At the same moment. Into unknown space. Far beyond where the coalition could follow. We chose to disappear rather than be exterminated. Taio stared at the empty map. But you didn't go with them. What happened to you? Yuna closed her eyes, searching her fragmented memories. The Hanyang. She had been on the Hanyang. They were supposed to jump with the others. But something went wrong. An explosion. Alarm screaming. The ship breaking apart around her. We were hit, she said. Just before the jump. The fold drive was damaged. We couldn't complete the journey. The ship was destroyed. She remembered floating in the vacuum of space, her immortal body shutting down to preserve itself. Her cells entering a state of deep hibernation, waiting for rescue that never came. I drifted, she whispered, for 847,000 years. Just floating in the void. My body kept itself alive, repairing damage, waiting. Until a Valorian survey ship found you, Taio finished. 3 years ago. In the dead space between star systems. They thought you were a hybrid refugee with memory loss. Yuna nodded slowly. The memories made sense now. The holes were filling in. But one question remained, the most important question of all. Did they survive? She asked, turning to face Talik. The scattering, did it work? Is there any record of what happened to the rest of my people? The old professor shook his head sadly. We searched for decades after the disappearance. We found empty stations, abandoned equipment, but no living humans. The official conclusion was that the fold drive technology was unstable, that the scattering failed, that your species was gone. Yuna looked at the star charts again, the empty spaces where humanity had once lived. But you never found bodies, she said. You never found proof of death. Talik hesitated. No, we did not. A small flame of hope ignited in Yuna's chest. If she had survived, drifting alone in the void for nearly 1,000,000 years, then perhaps others had survived too. Perhaps the scattering had worked. Perhaps humanity was out there, somewhere beyond the reach of maps and sensors, waiting. I need to find them, she said, her voice stronger now. I need to know if I'm really the last one, or if my people are still out there, somewhere. Taio stepped forward, his young face filled with determination. Then we'll search together, he said. However long it takes. Whatever it costs. We'll find the truth. For the first time in 847,000 years, Park Yuna felt like she had a purpose again. The galaxy had tried to erase humanity from existence. But one human remained, and she was not going to give up. The Council of the Valorian Collective met in the Great Chamber at the heart of the archive. 12 representatives from 12 species sat in a wide circle, their eyes fixed on the small human woman standing at the center. Yuna had never felt so alone. Surrounded by creatures who viewed her as a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. She understood their fear. History had taught them that humanity was dangerous, unpredictable, impossible to control. She could see it in their eyes. The question they were all asking: if one human survived, could there be more? Elder Borum, the oldest member of the council, spoke first. His voice was like grinding stones. You present us with a difficult situation, young one. Our ancestors fought a war to contain your species. Now you ask us to help search for survivors. Surely you understand our hesitation. I understand your fear, Yuna replied calmly. But I also understand the truth. Your ancestors tried to exterminate an entire species because of what they might become. Not what they had done, what they might do. That is not justice. That is murder. Murmurs rippled through the council. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Taiho stepped forward. He had asked to speak on Yuna's behalf, and the council had reluctantly agreed. Honored council, he began. I have studied our historical records carefully. The coalition attacked humanity without provocation. They struck civilian targets. They destroyed research facilities, hospitals, schools. We called it a containment action, but we all know what it really was. He paused, letting his words settle. We committed genocide. Or we tried to. And now, 847,000 years later, we have a chance to make it right. If any humans survived the scattering, we owe them the truth. We owe them acknowledgement. We owe them, at the very least, an apology. Elder Borum studied Taiho with ancient, tired eyes. You speak boldly for one so young. Do you truly believe that finding more humans will lead to peace? Or will it simply reawaken old conflicts? I believe, Taiho said firmly, that we will never know unless we try. And I believe that hiding from our past is no way to build a future. The council debated for hours. Arguments were made, concerns raised, fears expressed. But in the end, the vote was close. 7-5 in favor of a search mission. One small ship. A minimal crew. A journey into unknown space. Following fragments of memory and ancient star charts, thought it was more than Yuna had hoped for. The research vessel. Eternal Question launched 3 weeks later. Its crew was small but capable. Yuna and Taiho, along with a pilot named Sora, an engineer named Junho, and a security officer named Yunji. 5 souls sailing into the void. Searching for ghosts, Yuna's memories guided them. Fragments of coordinates, half-remembered conversations, images that surfaced in dreams. She would wake in the middle of the night cycle with new information burning in her mind. Star patterns, navigation codes, the names of places she had not thought about in centuries. Their first discovery came after 2 months of travel. An abandoned space station, drifting in the darkness between stars. Its hull was covered in strange symbols that made no sense to the Valorian crew members. But Yuna recognized them instantly. Korean, she breathed. Those are Korean characters. This is a human station. They docked carefully, weapons ready, unsure what they would find inside. The station was perfectly preserved. Air still flowed through the ventilation systems. Lights still flickered in the corridors. It was as if the inhabitants had simply stepped out and never returned. Yuna walked through the empty halls, touching walls and door frames, reading signs that she had not seen in what felt like lifetimes. cafeteria, medical bay, recreation center, command deck. In the command center, they found a message, a holographic recording preserved in a sealed chamber. A woman's face appeared, older than Yuna, with gray streaks in her hair and deep lines around her eyes. She looked tired but determined. "This is Captain Minji of Station Hope 7, the recording began. "If you're seeing this, then someone has finally found us. We are preparing for the scattering. The coalition has broken through our final defensive line. We have maybe 12 hours before they reach our position." The woman paused, taking a deep breath. "We're not giving up. We're taking everything, every person, every piece of technology, every shred of knowledge, and we're jumping into the unknown. We've calculated a destination beyond the galactic rim, a place no coalition sensor can reach. It's dangerous. Many of us may not survive the journey, but we'd rather take that chance than let them finish what they started." She looked directly into the camera, and Yuna felt as if the woman was speaking to her personally. "To anyone who finds this station, we are not hiding. We are waiting. When the galaxy is ready, when there are people like you who came looking instead of running, we will return. Follow the beacon. It will guide you home." The recording ended, but a new display activated, coordinates streaming in an endless loop. A location far beyond any map territory. "A beacon," Taiho said softly. They left a trail. Yuna felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Her people had not gone quietly into the dark. They had left breadcrumbs for anyone brave enough to follow. They continued their journey, moving deeper into unexplored space. At each stop, they found more evidence. Generation ships empty but maintained by automatic systems. Supply caches still stocked with provisions. More recordings from captains and commanders and ordinary people who had chosen hope over despair. The messages were similar, yet each one was unique. A father promising his children that they would find a new home. A scientist documenting research that she hoped future generations would complete. A soldier recording his final thoughts before the jump, afraid but refusing to show it. And everywhere, the same words appeared. "We're not hiding. We're waiting." Finally, after 6 months of travel, they reached the coordinates from the beacon. Empty space. Nothing but stars and darkness. JUNHO ran sensor scans while the crew waited anxiously. Minutes passed, then hours. Yuna began to fear that they had come all this way for nothing. Then Jinho gasped. "There's something here," he said, his voice shaking. "Something huge. It was hidden, some kind of stealth field I've never seen before. But it's deactivating. It's letting us see." On the view screen, space itself seemed to shimmer and fold. A massive structure materialized from nothing. A construct so large that it defied comprehension. Artificial planetoids. Manufactured stars. An entire civilization hidden within a bubble of bent light and twisted space. And from the heart of that impossible place, a signal reached them. A voice. Speaking perfect Korean. "Unknown vessel, you have been detected. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Yuna stepped forward, her heart pounding. "This is Park Yuna," she said. "Graduate of Seoul National University, class of 2157. Lead researcher on Project Eternal Spring. I've been searching for you for a very long time." A long pause, then a different voice, older, rougher, filled with emotion. "Yuna? Is that really you? We thought you were lost at Proxima. We mourned you for centuries." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm finally here. Welcome home." The eternal question passed through the barrier and entered a world that should not have existed. Yuna stood at the view screen, unable to speak. Her crew members were equally silent. their minds struggling to process what their eyes were seeing. Cities floated among artificial stars. Gardens the size of planets stretched in every direction. Ships moved between structures that defied every law of physics that the Valorian collective had ever discovered. Children played in zero-gravity parks, while adults walked along pathways that twisted through three-dimensional space like ribbons. This was not a hidden colony. This was not a refugee camp. This was a paradise built across 847,000 years of patient, careful development. Humanity had not simply survived. They had flourished. A graceful vessel approached to guide them to a landing platform. As they descended, Yuna could see people gathering below, thousands of humans, watching their arrival with expressions of joy and wonder. The moment the ship's doors opened, Yuna stepped out into a wave of sound, cheering, singing, people calling her name, reaching out to touch her as if to confirm that she was real. And then the crowd parted, and an old man walked forward. He was ancient, the oldest-looking human Yuna had ever seen. His hair was pure white, his face a map of deep wrinkles, his body thin and fragile. But his eyes were sharp and clear, and they filled with tears the moment he saw her face. "Yuna," he breathed. "After all this time, after all these centuries." She recognized him instantly, despite the weight of ages that separated them. "Jihan," she whispered. "You're still alive." He laughed, a weak, trembling sound. "The Eternal Spring Project worked for you. It worked for me too. I was your second test subject, remember? Though my version was less perfect than yours. I've aged. Slowly, but I've aged." He reached out and took her hands in his own. His skin was like paper, but his grip was strong. "We never stopped looking for you," he said. "The record said your ship was destroyed at Proxima. We sent search parties. For centuries, we combed that sector of space. Eventually, we had to accept that you were gone." His voice cracked, but I never truly believed it. I always hoped. Yuna embraced him gently, afraid of breaking his fragile body. "I'm sorry I took so long," she said. "You're here now," he replied. "That's all that matters." Over the following days, Yuna learned the full story of what had happened after the scattering. The fold jumps had been dangerous. Many ships were lost in transit, their crews vanishing into dimensions that no one understood. But most survived. They gathered at the designated coordinates, beyond the reach of the Coalition's sensors, and they began to build. At first, it was about survival. Growing food, establishing shelters, treating the wounded. But humans were not content with mere survival. They never had been. Generation after generation, they expanded. They improved. They created wonders that their ancestors could never have imagined. Artificial suns that would burn for billions of years. Habitats that could house trillions. Technology so advanced that it appeared as magic. And all the while, they watched the galaxy they had left behind. "We saw everything," Jihan explained as he walked with Yuna through a garden filled with flowers from Earth, species that had been carefully preserved for millennia. "We watched the Coalition declare victory. We watched them rewrite history to make themselves look justified. We watched new species rise and fall, and we watched your Valorian collective become the dominant power. Why didn't you return?" Yuna asked. "You could have. You have the technology now to defeat any fleet they could send against you." Jihan smiled sadly. "We considered it. Many times. When the news of the Coalition's declaration reached us, when we learned that they had labeled us extinct and called it a triumph, there were those who wanted revenge, who wanted to remind the galaxy that humanity was still alive, and that we had not forgotten what was done to us." He paused beside a fountain, watching the water flow in patterns that seemed to defy gravity. "But we made a different choice. We decided that becoming conquerors would make us no better than those who had tried to destroy us. We had a chance to become something new, something better. And so we focused on growth instead of vengeance, on creation instead of destruction, on becoming the kind of species that the galaxy should welcome rather than fear. Yuna thought about this for a long moment. She had carried anger in her heart for 847,000 years, even if she had not remembered it consciously. Anger at the coalition. Anger at the species who had tried to exterminate her people simply for existing. But standing here, in this impossible garden, surrounded by the evidence of what humanity had become, she felt that anger beginning to fade. The crew of the Eternal Question were treated as honored guests. Taiho spent hours in discussions with human scientists, learning about technologies that made Valorian achievements look primitive. Sora, Junho, and Yunji were given tours of human culture, art, music, literature that had developed in isolation for countless generations. But the true purpose of their visit became clear when they were summoned. Before the Human Council, the council chamber was vast and beautiful, filled with representatives from every human settlement. At the center sat a woman named Hana, the current leader of what they called the Hidden Sphere. "You have come from the galaxy that once tried to destroy us," Hana said, her voice calm and measured. "You have searched for us across impossible distances. You have brought with you one of our own lost children. And now, you deserve to know our intentions." She stood, and the entire chamber fell silent. "For 847,000 years, we have lived in hiding. We have grown. We have evolved. We have become something that our ancestors would barely recognize. And now, at last, we believe the time has come." She looked directly at Yuna. "Your presence here is a sign. You survived the war, the centuries, the endless void. And you were found by people who came looking for us with curiosity instead of weapons. People who wanted to understand rather than destroy." Hannah smiled. "Humanity is ready to return to the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as avengers, but as neighbors, as teachers, as friends. We have learned much in our long isolation, and we believe that sharing our knowledge will benefit all species. We do not seek to dominate. We seek to belong." The collective's delegation, Taiho, Sora, Junho, and Yunji, looked at each other in amazement. This was beyond anything they had expected. "You would share your technology?" Taiho asked carefully. "Your medical advances? Your scientific discoveries?" "All of it," Hana confirmed. "Freely and without conditions. We ask only one thing in return, that the galaxy acknowledge what was done to us. Not with punishment or payment, simply with truth. Let history record what really happened during the war. Let future generations learn from the mistakes of the past." Taiho bowed deeply. "I cannot speak for the entire collective, but I swear to you, I will carry your message to them, and I will fight for the truth to be told." Yuna felt tears in her eyes again. She seemed to be crying a lot lately, but these were tears of joy. She had spent 847,000 years lost and alone. She had woken with no memories, lived as a stranger among aliens, and slowly pieced together a history of tragedy and loss. But now she stood between two worlds, the ancient past and the living future, a bridge across the longest gap in galactic history. She thought of her graduation day, all those centuries ago, the pride she had felt, the dreams she had carried. She had wanted to change the world. She had never imagined that she would help change the galaxy. 1 year later, Professor Talek revised his lecture for the final time. The chapter on species 7291C was no longer titled Extinct Civilizations. It was now called The Long Return. And in the front row of his class, Park Yuna sat beside Tayo, finally able to tell her own story. Humanity had come home at last, and this time, they brought hope with them.